Hello everyone, thank you very much. I am starting, just trying to share this. If you can please share the program, that will be great. Oh, strange, I can't share it. The way I would like to share. I'm hoping the sound problems are not going to be an issue. Okay, let's check this. Yeah, everything seems okay now. And today I will answer some questions that I received over the internet on YouTube or not only in YouTube. There is a link down below in the information section. You can actually, if you want to suggest any questions, you're more than welcome to do so. I just, yeah. Now the sound should be a little better. I'm not totally aware whether it is perfect, but it should be better than other programs that I had in the past. The first question I would like to start today is I think it came from Google form. Let me just transition into that. And yeah, this is about Hizmet movement. Do you observe a general disconnect between senior figures and young people in the Hizmet movement? If so, do you think this disconnect affects Hizmet activities and understanding of its principles? I think it's a very nice question. Thank you very much for asking that. There is it's strange that I don't receive a lot of questions in English. So that's why I'm gonna keep putting the link below. Maybe people don't know how they can submit them. I'll try to skim them through YouTube as well, but you can suggest in any way. So I can't remember the name of the person, and some of them wants it anonymous anyway, so I don't necessarily share the names, but some of them you will see the names of the person who wanted to ask the question as well. So I think the generational difference within Hizmet movement is a very obvious issue, because Hizmet movement started in, let's say, the earliest you can take it, maybe 1960s. And it's almost 60 years. So the first people who were in the Hizmet movement, if they were, let's say, as young as even 15, or if they might be older, but they are now 75. And they hold the most senior position. So over 70, people who are aged over 70 are actually what we call the very old generation in the Hizmet movement. And they can actually be in the decision-making bodies in every way. And I just want to make sure this sound is not problematic. So if you have any problem, just let me know, because I realize there is one source is not included here. Let me put that in here as well, and we are good to go. Yeah, it should be better now. If you have any like double sound or anything, please let me know. Yeah, in the comment section, I will respond to that. I'll have the comment section open if needed, just in case. Okay, so. I was telling the very first people who established Hizmet movement are over 70 now, and they are mainly in the in the what we call the older generation. But we can actually divide, if we were to divide in between two people who have experience and joined Hizmet movement before 1980s or before 1990s, in the first 30 years of the Hizmet movement. We can consider them now in more managerial roles, more important, more strategic roles, and more representative of what Hizmet movement should look like, or what Hizmet movement is doing, or not being able to do that. And since these people are actually defining what Hizmet movement principles are and how it should be, it is obvious that there will be some sort of a generational differences, but those generational differences are too much now, because first of all, what used to define the original Hizmet movement and its context was Cold War political era, which means like people were either leftist, communist, pro-communist, or rightist, anti-communist. It may be capitalist or nationalist, it doesn't matter. So those politics have dramatically changed now. It's not anymore defining the world policy last maybe 30 years. And people who are younger than 40 years old, who have been introduced to Hizmet movement after 1990s, for them the problems are much different now, and it's actually it's getting more and more different every day. Not only the political the bipolar structure of the world, but also, apart from the Cold War era, there is a lot of technological big leap of changes, especially in terms of the introduction of the internet after 90s, and then later smartphones and the development of the P2P technologies, which most of those revolutions actually destroyed a lot of aspects of the traditional life, and then actually changed they changed a lot of there's some sound problem. Maybe I'll go back to traditional and try to fix this later in a different context. Yeah. Okay, so anyway, so there is a lot of technological changes since 1990s as well, especially the way internet has changed our lives. The information has changed, the smart introduction of the smartphones and the usage of the smartphones. And then later, based on that technological advancements, what we call P2P Revolution happened very recently, which means actually a lot of intermediary businesses, or the structures that relies on intermediary businesses or intermediaries, have lost their importance, or the intermediaries lost their importance. People actually can connect directly to the production, and to customer connection has established. If you want to buy anything, you don't need someone to export it for you from China. You can directly import it from China. You can get it from wherever you want by using the new technologies. The people who are producing something can make it available for everyone as well. It's not only products, it's also the information. Like, for instance, in the early years, if you want to voice your opinion, you need to you need to go on prime time in a TV. You have to be really successful, or really reach out to important places to go and be more, let's say, into the mainstream on TVs. But nowadays you don't need that. It's the fact that we can communicate over the internet. I can produce my thoughts and put it in a video form and share it with you. You can like it, share it, and this and that. So it made it available. So you don't need to be in the same room with people. You can actually take out the traditional media and traditional production chains in many ways, or basically what they call Uberization. You don't need a taxi shop anywhere, or a taxi branch in anywhere. If you need a cab, you can just get it via Uber. If you want to connect with people, you can do it directly. So this sort of a P2P revolution has happened in many in many parts, if you can see, the biggest companies in the world are nowadays the ones that have been actually emerged in the last couple of decades, relying on this sort of changes. Facebook, Twitter, Uber, and other bread and breakfast providers and this and that. These are actually now outgrowing all their competitors, even more than their competitors. And there is more recent developments are happening, which I understand that the older generation within the Hizmet movement may not be able to keep up with it. For instance, the blockchain technology, that's the way it will transform our lives. I'm not talking about bitcoins, but the technology itself, the way everything is recorded and everything is kept in everywhere, the way it will utilize the computer force. The 5G technology and the way it will enable a Chinese doctor to operate in England and an English doctor to operate in somewhere else almost without any delay by using the machinery available. And the COVID, the way the COVID actually is one of the outcomes as well of this product. The transportation, the travel is so expanded, so developed that any illness, any pandemic in anywhere almost has to travel all around the world, or the whole world has to respond in unison to be able to contain and stop it. Today, unfortunately, I learned that Britain has passed 100,000 people mark, and which is very sad because 50,000 of them almost happened in last 2 months since mid-November. Anyway, there is an emerging problem of global warming, a new form of racism. It's not like the one that we observed in First World War and Second World War or Hitler era, but actually it's a new form of, let's say, racism is now emerging because of global migration crisis and other issues. The homophobia is a new problem. Radicalization or extremism, these are new problems as well, emerging recently. And of course, populism that finds its place now in Eastern European states, recently in America has been, and various countries that actually going towards popular authoritarian leaders. And global terrorism is a new problem. Nowadays, you don't have a long indoctrination to become a terrorist, part of a terrorist cell. The terrorist organizations can actually recruit anyone around the world. It doesn't need a lot of tools. People who, if they want to join ISIS, they can grab a knife and commit a crime somewhere in the name of ISIS. These are all new problems, and they require new generations' input, however, which are not there in terms of Hizmet movement, because the new generations are not in, let's say, agenda-making positions, unfortunately, and Hizmet movement cannot make that leap. And apart from that, Hizmet movement is not only responding all these surrounding problems, there are other issues as well. To begin with, let's say, for instance, the main success of the Hizmet movement in 1960s, 70s, 80s, while Hizmet movement was in the context of Cold War and various different problems than today, one of the reasons why it was successful is because they created a fresh Islamic interpretation. They didn't necessarily sign up into Cold War in terms of whether you are going to be pro-communist or pro-capitalist. They actually define their own problems as poverty, discrimination, and ignorance, and then they try to solve them. So these problem solving generated a batch of fresh institutions like schools, supplementary schools, dialogue organizations, charity organizations, businessmen associations, and different things. And they become successful because actually they were solving a lot of problems people were having, like creating dormitories, student support houses, and all this sort of stuff. However, over the time, these fresh ideas become the status quo. Like initially really radical ideas as well, because many people were having difficulty to accept all these ideas or adopt all these ideas. So these ideas had some sort of a reaction in their own time. For instance, people who established Hizmet Movement in the 1960s had to fight their way with their old generation. And in most of the time, they have to actually separate their ways from the old generation so they can maintain the new stuff. And those days and the principles they implement in there, how they actually had the confidence to move away from the mainstream and do new stuff, is not necessarily preserved. Instead, the institutions they have established has been preserved, and they didn't have any pioneer before them, so there isn't anyone to follow the footsteps. They were pioneers, they did what they wanted to do. But for the young generation, they expect the young generation to fall in line and follow. So because of this, let's say almost late 90s, early 2000, the way we remember Hizmet Movement with thousands of schools in Turkey and thousands of supplementary schools in Turkey and some universities in Turkey, and schools and dialogue centers and charity work around the world, has frozen in people's mind as a static Hizmet Movement picture, and the coup attempt in Turkey and the persecution after that has destroyed that picture. So people in the old generation wants to go back to those good old days where they have all these institutions, the media, the schools, and other stuff. But for the younger generation, I believe they should look into this as a blank canvas where they can actually have a chance to reinterpret everything according to the new context and the new problems, and do what their predecessors, the older generation, let's say Mehmet Ali Şengül generation, what they did, they actually disregard everything they had. They look at their problems, they saw the, let's say, ignorance, and they start setting up houses and then dormitories, then schools and support schools and media. So every time they see a problem, they come up with a solution which wasn't practiced before, so which created the authentic Hizmet movement. So they were kind of revolution, or the people who were implementing them were revolutionists in a way. But the new generation of Hizmet movement now is not courageous enough to, let's say, or doesn't have opportunity enough, or doesn't feel empowered enough to come up with those sort of radical ideas. Ignore what old people and old generation are saying, respect them what they have achieved in the past in Turkey, but say now we've got different problems and we need different solutions, so we'll have to work on them. I think the coup attempt, and by coup attempt I mean the aftermath of the coup attempt, where everything is blamed on Gulen movement, all the institutions are closed down, so Hizmet movement doesn't have all these 100,000, 150,000 people working bureaucracy or institutions around the schools and business associations and charities and other stuff. So there is a chance for Hizmet movement to re-establish everything and bring a fresh set of principles. And in a way, that means like people, just young generation, could take this as a chance and look at the core of the principles that made Hizmet movement successful, being, contextual, looking at the problems, finding and dealing with real problems of people, and creating new institutions. And in the core, these are the main issues anyway. And then concentrate on that and create, like engage with new problems in the new forms and new ways. Like you don't have to anymore. Just like things changed in the world. For instance, if you want to put an input into Hizmet agenda, you don't need to write an article and expect it to be published in Zaman Daily or go on and talk about it on Samanyolu newspaper so that Hizmet people can hear you and listen you and convinced by it. You can actually generate that contact, talk to people, and make the advocate for the changes that you want to do. They have a chance to concentrate on future, draw their own ways, just like Mehmet Ali Şengül, Abdullah Yılmaz, and others did when they clash with their old generations. They have actually created their own new ways rather than just wait for old people to get out of the way and then generate their own stuff. I think for that there is a chance and an opportunity within the young generation, I mean below 40 at least, let's consider all of them as young, to just look at their own principles on the paper, what is Hizmet, what it's meant to achieve, what it is vision and mission in the world, and what sort of principles it should adhere, restructure them again. And then with those principles, look into the real world and see what sort of problems that are emerging that a good Muslim can contribute in solution to, like it was, let's say, ignorance, poverty, and discrimination. Now, let's say discrimination is still a big problem in new forms. Ignorance is a big problem, but it's not anymore about people not getting education in the schools, but mainly, let's say, social media caused ignorance, or lack of proper education channels on YouTube and other infrastructures, lack of good representation of issues in various other social media platforms, Instagram and YouTube, and other new forms where actually people are radicalized nowadays on YouTube and Facebook by looking at issues on internet. That means there isn't enough information put out there for people to utilize and learn better ways to deal with it. So I think, and even not only these sort of issues, there can be change within in terms of how fundraising works. It used to be like, let's say, there was a local sohbet group that used to come together every week, and then they used to fundraise among themselves to support the projects they have decided, and so on and so forth. This was 1980s, 1990s, and 2000. But nowadays it can be much more broad and global. If you have a good idea, you can put it on internet, ask people to support you via GoFundMe or Patreon or YouTube on different ways, and you can make it happen because you can find people to support you. In a nutshell, there is generational disconnect as per normal, that you would expect old people would be understanding the world differently, react to it differently and whatever, and young people to have it in a different way. But there are other issues as well. The context has changed. The problems that the humanity is facing today is much different than the way the previous generation has had issues. So that makes problems a bit bigger. And the other issue, I think, because of the huge respect, or because of all this young generation is a product of this old generation's bold approach or their revolutions in their own time, the young generation feels themselves not enough empowered to do the change they want to do. So that puts a psychological barrier, because these people actually didn't necessarily follow anybody's footstep. They generated new stuff, but the young people may not feel themselves in that way. And let's see how it goes. Yes. We'll try with this. Is that any better, if you can tell me? Because I really want to try this one. Because a lot of people are saying that they don't have enough voice. So once for all, without any echo, it should be sorted. Okay, if you have a problem, you can write it on them. Let's go to the second question. Second question, this came in Turkish, but I had to write it in English. What do you think about the Economist article entitled Fethullah Gulen shares the blame for Turkey's plight? I'll show you slightly which article the person is asking. So yeah, let's actually keep it there. Most popular article for 2020. It's a strange thing. I think the article narrates the most of people in Turkey. Various people have various issues with religious people or their business and various issues. So there are a variety of them. I'm not saying all of them, but most of these people don't want religion to be in public sphere in various degrees. They want to ban wearing universities and other places. Some makes it more. So the article is very much sharing that opinion. In fact, the recent documentary of Can Dündar, The Bridge Köprü, that was produced for the German TV channel as ZDF. Anyway, it has the similar line, and I think it is getting more and more permanent now. I hope it can. The things that I mentioned, to put Fethullah Gulen and his movement in a worse light, because they are afraid that everyone understands Erdogan is a dictator. He's becoming an authoritarian, more dictator, and everyone agrees that he's bad. But executing Gulen is so perceived, directly says that is bad, so these people should be good. On that, to push them, no, actually, Fethullah Gulen actually shares the blame for the underscore is like the exiled imam did much to cripple democracy, as if it is his job to actually protect and preserve democracy, or or increase it and whatever. So it's like almost you're criticizing a minister in government and whatever. And to prove that point, they have exaggerated a lot of numbers in there, like the numbers of people that purged in the police, the numbers of people from judiciary. They are exaggerated numbers, very much exaggerated, to prove that point, and in a way to justify the purge. Because first of all, let's say a group of people did a coup, them and punish them. Why would you arrest people based on affiliation? But to create that justification, almost like they created this evil image, I think, and it's not very much the job of the journalist, but however that is the case. I think in a sense overall Islamophobic a bit, because overall the article almost says that, well, if you are a Muslim, you might be evil as well. Why would we trust you? That sort of stuff. Like Erdogan was an Islamist politician, and he's turned bad and evil and whatever. So Gulen is a Muslim scholar. He is bad as well. Anything to do with Islam, like if you were to ask article, okay, this is a 90% Muslim country, tell us a good Muslim alternative. What is your ideal Islamic interpretation? They would say none. In fact, it should go back to the way Mustafa Kemal has established. Okay, we go back to normal sound. So this is still better, the original sound. And Google is listening me at the moment. So whenever I say Google...
Listen to what?
Okay, Google, mute yourself. That's enough. There you go. I've got Google intervene. So anyway, but the biggest problem is that the numbers are not accurate. It's exaggerated. it is taken a point which is very Kemalist and I believe a touch Islamophobic as well. And hopefully this should be, not repeated again. But I suspect this line will continue to emerge in Western media, because the way recently European Union responded to Erdogan and Turkey is actually showing that, okay, this might be another dictator in our border, but as far as he keeps the refugees and immigrants in Turkey and not let them come to Europe and other issues that we are concerned, as far as he is good with us in those terms, we don't care whether he's democratic or not. Okay, and the next question, this is from Iqbal Munshi. It's a YouTube comment. I sourced it from them. Iqbal Munshi said, it's said that if someone leaves Islam, we should kill him. Is it true? Please answer this. I used to do some short videos about religion and some issues, and one of the people wanted to know about that, so I want to answer this question. It's a very important question, and it is such a popular opinion. Many people doesn't know where it comes from. But if you were to ask any Muslim or non-Muslim in that case, say, what do you think? What happens to people when they leave Islam? What happens to them? And many people don't necessarily will answer the question and say, well, it's liberal and whatever. They will say, well, it used to be killed, or it's supposed to be killed. Or they would say, well, it used to be the old times, but not. So I'll rephrase the question. Does Islam allow a person to disaffiliate from it? Can you leave Islam? Yes, you can, in short. Can you abandon Islam? Yes. Renounce it as well. That's no problem. Becoming apostate it doesn't require any persecution. That's gonna be my point. But I'm going to explain it. If you don't have any long time to listen to that, I am going to explain that. I am going to explain that in a way that how this opinion is formulated, where it came from, and why. What other debates happened around it. So first of all, the popular opinion is not mentioned anywhere in the Quran. In fact, there isn't any worldly punishment that is mentioned in the Quran anywhere. There are a lot of verses against it, like there is no compulsion in religion, or there is a specific verse that talks about if people come into Islam and leave Islam and then change their mind and come back to Islam and then change their mind back and leave the Islam, and they can actually remain forever like that, and their disbelief will continue in that way. So first of all, when we want to learn any jurisprudence, any rule in Islam, we have two sources. One is Quran and the other is Sunnah or Hadith, however you take it. Quran is the holy book. If something is written in there within the context of its revelation and everything, you try to understand and you try to implement that. And the Quran doesn't have very much direct orders. They can count up to 80, 90 rules in there that you can directly take. But mostly it is a principle, collection of a lot of principles that you have to apply in your life. But Sunnah, the practice of the Prophet, or the sayings, his teachings, his verbal teachings, Hadith, has a lot of issues resolved in there. For instance, Quran says pray regularly, both end of the days and middle of the days and whatever. But in practice, we know how many times we have to pray, how we should pray, what we should read while we should pray, how we should prepare for a prayer and whatever. So there is a balanced relation. If you can't find a topic in either Quran or Sunnah, then Muslim scholars are allowed to make their own opinion, and if many scholars form the similar opinion, it becomes almost a verbal constitution in Islam. Later, people have to consider that as an ijma, a consensus on a topic. Let's say, recently, many Muslim scholars are formulating opinions that smoking is haram, which wasn't the case, let's say, 20 years ago. When it becomes the dominant opinion, then it becomes an ijma, and it creates a precedence for later coming jurisprudence and whatever. And also, if you can't find anything in the Quran, in the Hadith, or in the ijma, like people get angry, and then you find similar topics and make an opinion. So I already said there isn't anything in the Quran about killing apostates. So how come people are killing apostates, or where does it come from? First of all, I'm going to give you 3 hadith-related issues. One issue real-life example that Prophet had in his lifetime, and 2 of his sayings that have been narrated. Don't stop anywhere after this point, because you may want to listen until the end of it. And then I will give some other hadiths and other examples in the life, while it is contrary to popular belief. And I'll say how does this idea came about and explain, and I'll tell you why it is not Islamic to actually kill people just because they've changed their religion back from Islam. First of all, there is a hadith in Bukhari. I'm giving for this one, I'm giving where it came from as well. According to this hadith, it's very clear: whoever changed his religion, kill him. It's in Bukhari, Sahih al-Bukhari, volume 9, book 84, hadith number 56. You can change. Sometimes the way they actually formulate books might be different, but you'll find this hadith. So this is the most popular one that people know and contrary. But first of all, this hadith is narrated by only one person. It's called Ibn Abbas, and it's called Ahad hadith. One person narrated the hadith. No one else. Out of 100,000 Muslims, no one else remembers this or relates or narrates this hadith the way it is. But the way the hadith books are working is it's a record of history in a way, which means if they hear something, even from one person, as far as they trust that person is telling the truth, they would record it. And they will say that, well, we have heard this from Ibn Abbas, and he has heard from here and there and whatever. But you can't base a death penalty judgment on an ahad hadith. You can't actually base any judgment on ahad hadith, which means like singular mention hadith. Like if a hadith is just in a hadith book, doesn't mean it is a rule or a law. If it is a weak hadith, if it is contradicted by other hadiths, you have to look all of it. So you can't base such a punishment on this one just because it says so, because it is a ahad hadith. You can't even base any other less important issues, let alone more important issues. By the way, we will have a dialogue in Islam course, which we will deal with all these issues, repeating again soon. Follow the Twitter feed. You may find the link in there. We are starting someone next month, and we'll be talking about this issue a bit more extensively. And the second hadith is narrated in a couple of different sources, and one of them says, the blood of a Muslim who confesses that there is no God but Allah, and that I am the messenger of Allah, cannot be shed except in 3 cases: a life for a life. So if someone kills someone, so he can be punished by that. A married person who commits illegal sexual intercourse, zina in Islam. A married person, when they do adultery, they might be punished, not necessarily always. And the one who turns renegade from Islam, will become apostate and leaves the community of Muslims. So the hadith in this form is mentioned, but Hazreti Aisha, the Prophet's wife and one of the most reliable sources in the hadith, in these sort of teachings, mentioned the same hadith and finishes it with it says a man who leaves Islam and renegades Islam and fights against Muslims. So if someone peacefully leaves Islam, he may not be a problem, but if he fights against Islam, then you can kill him and whatever. So the first version is in a way obviously suggests that if someone leaves Islam, you can kill them. But now you have the same hadith from Hazreti Aisha, the same hadith, but it ends like if someone renegades Islam and fights you. So you can't now take it just because one version is saying something. So this is the second reason why people do that. And there is a historical fact as well, which is called Uran tribe. This is a tribe that received capital punishment for a story that I'm going to tell now. So, for instance, this Beni Urayna, a group of people came to Medina and converted to Islam. And a few days later, they say, well, we don't feel good in here. Can you send us somewhere where we can recover our health because we become ill? Which is, nowadays, we can understand that there are various different strands of viruses and microbes in different places. So people who are not immune to them can get that illness easily. So the Prophet sent them to a nearby oasis, a village where they keep the camels of Muslim treasury, and he asked the shepherds of those camels who are looking after the camels in the name of the Muslim community to look after them, make them drink the camel milk and fresh air, and so recover them. But these, let's say, ignorant people who join Islam for whatever reason, maybe they planned and plotted about this or not, once they recover their strength, maybe they weren't ill or sick at all, but we don't know. Once they recover their strength, they kill those shepherds and take all these camels and run away with it. So they stole from public treasury. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, when he heard about this, he asked them to be captured, which people went them and captured and bring them back. And the Prophet has ordered them to be executed. So many people use this as a reason why people should be killed if they were to live Islam, which doesn't suggest anything, because according to Islamic law, because they killed someone, they deserve capital punishment. So, for instance, if they were still remain as Muslim and just kill the shepherds and stole the public camels, they would have been still killed for the crimes that they have committed. So it doesn't necessarily say they were killed because of their renunciation of Islam. So now, these are the three. If you look any other source, there isn't anything else. Nothing in the Quran, nothing in the Hadith. The whole big issue is based on these three topics. That one is only a single Hadith. One person only narrates that Hadith. The other one has a version that says only kill them when they become an enemy combatant, because in the early years of Islam, when people come and become Muslim, they make also a political affiliation, which is called Diyat, to protect Muslim community against their enemies. So it's also a peace treaty between, if a tribe comes into Islam or a person comes into Islam, it's a bayat as well. So in a way, renouncing Islam may also mean that changing your diplomatic stance from friend to foe, from ally to enemy. So, and it is mainly interpreted in that way, which I will tell with a couple of more points. I'll make that one as well. So, what happens is that there is another hadith, which is I'm putting into so you can check that one as well. There is a Bedouin who came to become Muslim and pledge allegiance to Allah's apostle, the Prophet for Islam, and then the Bedouin get fever at Medina and say, or he decided to change. He changed his mind. He got his cold feet, and he decided to change his mind and say, "Oh Allah, apostle, cancel my pledge." The Prophet ignored him. He come and did again, and third time he said publicly, "I renounce my religion, and I am declaring unilaterally that I don't find myself binding with the political pledge I made as well, so I'm leaving." And he left. So what did the Prophet do, this public renunciation? Nothing. He actually said, one of the famous hadiths based on this, said that Medina is like a pair of furnace. It expels its impurities and brightens and clears the good. So he says, there you go, he left us. No problem. So there is nothing actually happened to him if you look at it. So we know in the Prophet's life, people who publicly renounce Islam are not necessarily punished with the death penalty just because they renounce Islam. There is another less known, but is a more famous, I think, personality. You may say he was just a Bedouin, one of the Prophet's long-distant relative who initially emigrated to Ethiopia in the first emigration wave, become Christian and lived happily ever after, and nothing happened to him, no one killed him, or not even any animosity has emerged about him or anything. So that sort of, and although it is not recorded because it's not the, people don't necessarily want to keep a record of how many people renounce Islam, we know there is a lot of people who renounce Islam and not necessarily killed or harmed, as far as they are not becoming an enemy fighting against Muslims. There is another issue. When you look into fiqh or jurisprudence of apostate, you see that especially the Hanafi school takes this issue into among the political issues, not among Aqidah or fiqh or belief related issue. It says there's a political and international relations section of its own issues, because they consider it as a matter of politics that someone leaves you and becomes your enemy. And on top of that, nobody actually says that if a Muslim man, people say in Hanafi fiqh, if a man renegades Islam and become enemy, he was killed because he can become, it may mean that he is an enemy combatant now, he's going to attack us or whatever. If you convince that, that is I think the jurisprudence comes in there. But even Hanafi school says that you can't kill a woman on the same basis just because he renegades, he renounced Islam. Which means actually, although if it was about belief, a man's belief and a woman's belief is not different, they would be punished similarly. But a woman is not considered as politically, like an enemy. She can't go and join enemy army and become there isn't a potential for her to be an enemy of Islam. So you can't justify that because it's a political justification. There is no religious basis for it. So for these reasons and for these examples, you can understand that there is nothing in the Quran says that people should be killed if they apostate Islam. In fact, there are verses otherwise, and there is a few hadiths, 2 hadiths and 1 incident, which totally is interpreted politically. It can't be necessarily about belief. Now, for that reason, apostates actually shouldn't be. It's not in the essence of Islam. We're talking about Dark Ages, Middle Ages here, 600, 700, 800, whatever. In those times, anyone who deserted an army would be killed. Anyone who considers it commit treason, high treason, would be killed. And it is still same as in martial law as well. If you suspect for someone spying for the enemy, even among your ranks, people take serious repercussions about that and whatever, even now. And so this was a purely political discussion, not necessarily fiqh related. If someone leaves Islam without necessarily harming or attacking people, not attacking verbally, I'm saying like physically damaging their life, there isn't any justification for them to be killed, not in the Quran, not in the Hadith. It's just the political, the Arab princes and kings that were Muslim, or Turkish sultans and kings, whatever. They used to punish people just like European monarchs when they want to, and try to justify their punishment based on religious opinion, just like European monarchs did. But it's not necessarily Islamic, but unfortunately it's a popular opinion which should be reconsidered. Many people don't know this issue. Another issue, this is another YouTube comment, says, because when I was explaining these sort of topics, people may come and say, remember, people who do not believe in Islam are second-class people, therefore Muslim can lie to us without any problem. It is in the Quran, and that is what he's doing. So he's Dominic saying. So I said, okay, I'll answer this rather than responding to him in the comment section. Does Quran or Islam allow you to lie to anyone? No, absolutely not. Actually, in early Muslims, Muslims used to consider lying to anyone as a matter of disbelief. would kick someone out of Islamic fold. There is no such thing in the Quran, and the problem is all these sort of wrong interpretations or uneducated opinions that we acquire from media and different places can start create a new reality. So what I'm trying to do is just to explain what I believe or I know is, and try to make it more popular. Okay, this is, I think, the last question of today. It's from Gönül from America. She said, when I check Islamic resources and observe Hizmet movement practices, economically and socially, the movement is more closer to leftist Democrats, even socialists and Marxists approach, than Republicans in the USA. When I observe how they identify themselves, how Hizmet movement members identify themselves, it is different. They identify themselves conservative, Republican, right-wing. Why the practices are leftist, like Himmet, fundraising, giving scholarship to kids, zakat, welcoming all cultures, etc., but identification is closer to the right or conservative. First of all, it's difficult to talk about politics after the Trump becoming a Republican president in America, but first of all, there is a difference between Turkish politics and Western politics. In most Western countries, conservatism is not what it is in Turkey. In Turkey, many conservatives, when you call someone conservative, that means he's religious, he's observant, he's muhafazakar. But in the West, it's not that. If you want to identify someone religious, you have to say Christian Democrat, if he's Christian. It's not necessarily Christian. So, first of all, left and right, or conservative and Labour, or Democrat, in two-party systems like the UK and USA, a lot of issues like family, like the state, conserving certain values, LGBT issues, tax issues, a lot of issues that conservatives are feeling strong about. I'm not sure about, let's say, gun laws in the United States case, but in the UK, a lot of issues in principle is very Islamic, is being also advocated by conservatives of this country and of America as well. So theoretically, you would expect people to align themselves, or Hizmet people to align themselves more conservative voting bloc. But because many of Hizmet movement people, especially newly arriving people, are actually immigrants and have limited rights and require, let's say, equal opportunities and other issues, I think what they need is a lot of support and a lot of liberal policies to work for them. So they find themselves in practice very near to leftist, Marxist, even socialist or Democrat. If it is divided into, normally these would be different parties as well, but they would find themselves away from the Republicans and nearer to the Democrats. Of course, this is a very broad explanation. The more they get old and, let's say, strengthen their foothold and feel more part of the system, or feel first-class citizen, feel protected, feel safe and secure, then the more conservative they may become. A very strange example from the UK is in the Brexit vote, loads of Asian, Pakistani, Indian, Asian subcontinent people of British background has voted for Brexit because they didn't want Polish immigration to continue. So Polish people started to immigrate later, so it is increasing and they're undercutting the market of established, like, let's say, Pakistani Indians, when they come to this country, they already undercut a lot of white British labor force in terms of transport, in terms of taxi, in terms of construction and other places. Now the Polish people are coming and even undercutting that. That sort of, so people who are supposed to be more liberal and Democrat and more pro-immigration find themselves anti-immigration because now they are one layer ahead and they don't want something else happen. So I think it is something similar is happening. In principle, you may feel your values in terms of, let's say, in America, it's a big issue. I know abortion is more similar to conservative party lines, but in practice, America, if you are an immigrant who arrived in America, you may not want a Republican Party in charge because it will impose a Muslim ban, or it will make it difficult to get visas and this and that. So I think that is the problem. But Gönül Hanım may have some friends who are actually in America more than 10-15 years, who feel like a bit more at home in America, and they might be leaning towards the Conservative Party, which is totally understandable in my opinion. So Hizmet Movement people are, I would say, in the Western countries would have that dilemma, and there is justification for them to feel either inclined in the UK, for instance, most Hizmet people would incline to Labour Party, but I would understand a lot of them would actually root for Conservative Party in here, because a lot of issues that Conservatives are feeling strong is shared in theory, but you may not be able to take part in the Conservative Party without having discrimination in the UK if you are coming from a different background, because you'll find Conservative Party is really very, very different, representing a very different section of the society. I think that's all. Thank you very much. This week's questions are that much. If you have any on YouTube, I can answer them, or we can just finish it just in a good time. I think less than an hour. It's brilliant. Okay, I think there isn't. That's fine. But please do not forget to check the information section below the video. And if you find any questions, if you have any questions, don't forget to submit the questions there, and hopefully we can answer them next time. Thank you very much for watching. Have a nice day.